What's the most terrifying real-life paranormal experience you've ever had? My roommate and I saw each other in different parts of the house at the same time. This happened a few years ago, but we still talk about it to this day. I had moved in with my best friend after she inherited a small 2-bedroom townhouse when her grandfather passed away. It was built in the 80s, and he had been the original owner. She told me that even when she was a kid, paranormal things would happen in that house. Similarly, I grew up in a home where my parents were the original owners, yet we still had our share of strange experiences. I am heavily involved in spirituality and witchcraft, so a little activity never really bothered me. Small strange things would happen from time to time. A broken lamp would be on in the morning, even though we had definitely gone to bed with everything turned off. We'd hear footsteps upstairs when one of us was home alone. Sometimes, we'd hear the back door open with a very distinct sound in the middle of the night. But the strangest experience was the day we saw each other on different levels of the house. I came home from work one afternoon. I was working very early shifts at the time, from 5:30 in the morning to 2 in the afternoon. She worked fully remote, and her desk was in her bedroom. When I walked in, I saw her sitting on the couch in the dark. Since it was a middle unit with limited windows, the living room was always dim. I joked about whether her boss was going to notice she was away from her desk. She said nothing. I started unloading my work bag and heading to the kitchen to make a snack, chatting casually about dinner plans. She still didn't respond. Instead, she quietly stood up and went upstairs. I remember thinking, that was weird. Maybe she's mad at me for something. I finished my snack, sat on the couch for a few minutes to decompress from work, and then headed upstairs to my room. I had only been home for about 10 minutes total. Our bedroom doors were right next to each other. Hers was at the very top of the stairs, on a slightly slanted wall, and mine was immediately to the left on the small hallway wall. We both kept our doors open, and from her room she could always see the stairs. When I reached the top, my door was closed, and she looked at me with a panicked expression and said, "Hello." I was completely confused and echoed, "Hello?" She leaned forward, looking back and forth between me and my closed door, before motioning for me to come into her room. She said, "I literally watched you come up here 10 minutes ago. I asked how your day was, and you didn't respond. You just went into your room and closed the door." She thought I was mad at her. So I said, "Wait, weren't you just downstairs? You watched me come home from work." She had been in her room the entire time, so she was obviously shaken. She had watched me go into my bedroom and close the door. And then a few minutes later, I came up the stairs again as if nothing had happened. I told her what I had experienced, and the strangest part to me is that we were both talking to whatever this was. Yet neither of us heard the other person speaking from upstairs or downstairs. And this was a small townhouse. You could normally hear anyone talking from anywhere in the house. The one major difference was my bedroom door physically closing. I busted in there with the urgency of confronting something or someone. There was nothing. Not even a strange feeling, just emptiness. We smoke cleansed the house afterward, and I kindly asked whatever had been playing games with us not to do that again, because that was unbelievably weird. She was adamant about keeping kind spirits around and didn't want to push out her grandfather's spirit, since she believed a lot of the small occurrences were him. Nothing of that level ever happened again. Things went back to the usual footsteps and the broken lamp turning on in the middle of the night. But every time we talk about it, I get the feeling it was something else entirely. Story 2. Something is definitely wrong with my house. To start, I live with my boyfriend and his family. I moved in after they had already owned the house for a while, but even they said something felt wrong from the moment they moved in. When they first arrived, the next-door neighbor mailed them holy water as a housewarming gift. And on their first night, my boyfriend's sister watched a bird fly into the breezeway window. I am very superstitious, and ever since I moved in, I have feared what might be waiting in the dark. After moving in, my boyfriend and I took the attic room. He has a cross hanging on the wall. One day, we had a friend over, and suddenly the cross fell off the wall. Then the TV turned on by itself, playing a random show out of nowhere. That night, my boyfriend saw someone sitting on our stairs. A red face with no mouth and large, black eyes. Another incident happened when I went downstairs late one night to use the bathroom. The basement door is in the kitchen, and it is always kept shut. But that night, it was open, and the light was on. I went to the bathroom without thinking much of it, but when I came back out, the basement light was off, and the door slammed shut right in front of me. The thing about the basement is that there is one area down there the dog will not enter at all. She usually goes everywhere, especially if there is a treat involved, but she absolutely refuses to go into one corner of the basement. Then last night, something happened that I cannot explain. My boyfriend woke me up and told me to just listen. That is when we heard this wheezing, almost like heavy breathing, right next to our bed. I sat up and shined my light, but there was nothing there. Then the breathing moved to my side of the bed, right next to my head. The air suddenly felt freezing. After that, it shifted to my boyfriend's side of the bed. Then it moved toward the stairs, the same place where he had seen that creepy red figure. It would not stop. I am worried that something is definitely wrong with this house. Story 3. I grew up in a haunted house. I'm a bit nervous posting this, but I have a bunch of strange experiences. The one that nags at me the most is the random voice mimicking that used to happen. We, my family, a friend, and I, lived in a forest with a dark past, and many people had lost their lives there. We heard laughing from the woods, voices that sounded like family members, and much more. Bowls were moved out of closed cabinets. People felt touches or intense paranoia, and there were consistent nightmares about something with red eyes. I think that's all I can say for now. But does anyone know what this might have been, based on the information provided? I can give more context in another post, or in the comments if needed. Honorable but unrelated mention. My grandmother was with her mother when she passed, and on her deathbed, her mother asked, "Who are the people in white?" That has always stayed with me. Maybe they were angels or something similar. It makes me wonder, especially because my grandmother says her mother was not a good woman. I do not know. I just needed to get that out. The things I experienced never scared me much because I grew used to them, but I still want a better understanding of what they were. I might post more in this subreddit if anyone is interested in the full stories. Story 4. I am a 25-year-old woman, and I grew up an orphan, raised by my grandmother, in a house that seems to absorb all the grief and loss it has held over the past 40 years. This home has seen addiction, domestic abuse, death, self-harm, and much more. There is one specific room that I believe is the epicenter of all the activity in the house. It was my childhood bedroom, my father's bedroom, and it once belonged to my uncle, who died at 19. The room has been rented out to many people during the lowest points of their lives, and you can still feel that heaviness the moment you step inside. I was around 3 when I first noticed the activity. It started with the footsteps coming from that room. Slow, heavy steps that sounded like a grown man pacing back and forth. My grandmother always told me it was just the house settling, but it sounded far too rhythmic for that. We could not keep a light in there to save our lives. Every bulb burned out, and every lamp ended up on the floor, broken within a week or 2 of being placed in the room. Shadow figures would watch me play from the doorway, and the closet door simply would not stay closed. Eventually, I started pushing my toy chest against the door so I would not wake in the middle of the night to the sound of it slowly creaking open. It happened every night, something every single person who stayed in that room eventually experienced. The activity stayed, fairly minimal until I entered middle school. That was the year my depression became suffocating, and the activity started increasing in frequency. It slowly began spreading to other areas of the house as well. Doors would slam on their own, and my grieving grandmother would hear the voices of the dead calling out to her. There were moments when it felt like hands were holding mine or rubbing my back in a soothing way as I cried myself to sleep. I grew up believing my dead relatives were still with us, and for a long time, that brought me comfort. But as I entered high school, that belief began to change. At first, I thought the thundering footsteps pounding down the stairs into the kitchen, always starting from that room, belonged to my father or my uncle. I remembered that same sound from early mornings when they used to barrel downstairs for breakfast. This experience happened regularly, and many people heard it over the years. Maybe it was them, but I have a strong suspicion that something or someone was mimicking those familiar sounds as a trick. The voices of the dead were no longer the only voices my grandmother was hearing. When I was 15, I started spending less and less time at home, but somehow my voice never seemed to leave with me. During the height of the activity, my grandmother would regularly hear me calling to her from the opposite side of the house, even when I was nowhere near home. The moment she first heard me calling out was when everything changed. Light fixtures began falling from the ceiling as we walked under them. Figures became frequent visitors in the dark. Footsteps circled the bed at night. Doors would lock on their own. Things went missing, and we started losing track of time. And then I began to get sick. I had to earn my GED because I missed so much school due to an illness doctors struggled to diagnose. Later, we learned my kidney was one of several issues that appeared seemingly overnight. I will not assume that all of life's problems came from this house, but the timing felt more than coincidental. I include it with everything else because I cannot completely rule out that it might be connected to what was happening there. It has been about a decade since all of those experiences, and now our life in this house is fairly quiet. We cleanse that room every couple of months and no longer rent it out. I still see the occasional shadow figure, and things still go missing from time to time. But now we take that as a sign that it is time for another spiritual cleaning. The last cleansing was this summer after I showed the room to a friend, and she was scratched by something inside. That worries me, as it was the first time someone was physically harmed by whatever is in that room. Things have been quiet since, though, so I'm hoping it was only a one-time incident. Story 5. I thought I would share an experience I have and see if anyone can suggest what might be going on or how to debunk it. Please share your thoughts or similar experiences. I would love to hear them. I live in my childhood home, which we moved into nearly 30 years ago. It is an Edwardian semi-detached house, so it is now over 100 years old. Every night, we hear what sounds like footsteps walking up and down the landing. I can hear them from my bedroom, and I can hear them from downstairs if I go to bed late. It genuinely sounds like someone pacing from one end to the other. Sometimes, the footsteps stop right outside my bedroom door, and it feels as though someone is pushing against it, though it never opens. One time, I was actually standing on the landing when the footsteps started, and they walked right through me. It was terrifying in the moment, but nothing else happened afterward. At first, I thought the sound might be carrying over from our neighbors, but they are both elderly and disabled, and they walk much more slowly than the footsteps we hear. I also considered heating pipes, but the footsteps happen in the summer as well. Multiple people have heard this over the entire time we have lived in the house. We never tell visitors about it, yet many of them bring it up the next morning without prompting. Over the years, a few other strange things have happened. My dad once woke to see a woman walking around the end of the bed, and he even moved his feet out of the way so she could sit down, thinking it was my mom. My mom once saw a man walk through the downstairs hallway and vanish. But aside from those moments, it is usually a quiet, unremarkable house. Story 6. Lately, small but strange things have been happening in my house, and I honestly do not know what to make of it. I am not sure if it might be my grandmother, who passed away earlier this year, or if it is something darker, a bad spirit, or something trying to scare me. The first thing my boyfriend and I noticed was the bathroom door opening or closing on its own. We know this for sure because we always keep the bathroom door shut so the cats cannot get in there. My cat likes to drink from the toilet, and we keep Clorox in it, so keeping them out of the bathroom is a top priority. One night, my boyfriend was asleep upstairs. I used the bathroom and shut the door behind me like I always do. Then I went outside to smoke and watch YouTube. I never smoke inside. After maybe 20 to 30 minutes, I went back inside to use the bathroom again. I noticed the bathroom door was partly open, which immediately gave me goosebumps because I always shut that door. My boyfriend can be a little forgetful about keeping it closed, but I never am. So seeing it open really shook me. A couple of days later, I was staying at a friend's house, and my boyfriend told me he had been sitting on the couch when he suddenly heard the bathroom door open. He said it was completely quiet in the house, and he only noticed it because he was scrolling for a YouTube video. When I got home the next night, he told me about it before we went to bed, and I got goosebumps all over again. The next morning, I told him about what had happened to me with the bathroom door as well. Last night, my dad came over to bring me a laptop for work. Long story short, I took my cat's plastic stick toy, the one with the fish and strings, out of the drawer to show my dad how my female cat, Karma, will play with it non-stop even when I am not holding it. After she played with it for a little while, my boyfriend asked me to put it away because she was annoying him, so I put it back in the drawer. Later that night, we were in bed, almost asleep, when I heard the cats playing with something. I looked downstairs, and Karma had the plastic stick toy with the fish and strings again. I had not taken it out of the drawer since my dad had been over. So how did it get out? I think my house might be haunted, but I am not sure. And I feel like I'm going crazy. There was one night when I walked into the house and it smelled like sage. I have only used sage once in my life, and that was at my mom's trailer after my grandmother passed. We also have some of my grandmother's antiques in the house, and I have a laptop that belonged to a close family friend of hers who also passed away. So I really do not know who or what might be causing all of this. Let me know what you think, or if you have any opinions on what I should do. Story 7. I think my grandparents weren't living alone in their old apartment. To clarify, most of the things I'm going to describe are not my own first-hand experiences, but stories I have been told by my mother, my aunt, and my grandparents themselves. For some background, my grandparents used to live in a relatively small apartment in Chita, a gloomy, severely unpleasant, and absolutely freezing city in southern Siberia. I am not sure whether they ever had contact with the previous owners, as they never shared that with me. I spent much of my childhood living in that apartment, since my parents were often away on business trips or something similar. Anyway, this is where the paranormal part comes in. This place had more than its fair share of unsettling moments. The apartment always carried a strange, heavy energy, and the entire building felt the same. The stairwell was incredibly creepy, and you could often hear odd noises coming from it late at night. The apartment itself was not much better. Guests would often ask us about our cat, explaining that they had seen a black cat slipping around corners in the apartment and disappearing just as quickly. We never had a cat. On one of their trips to China, my grandparents bought a geisha-like doll or figure. It stood on a shelf in the foyer, and every member of our family, and even visitors, talked about how unsettling it was. Its eyes seemed to follow you no matter where you went. I remember being absolutely terrified of it as a child. Though these experiences are strange, they are nothing compared to what I'm about to describe next. This part is genuinely unsettling. First, I want to make it clear that my grandparents are completely mentally healthy. Even now, in their very old age, they do not suffer from dementia, Alzheimer's, or any similar condition. This phenomenon also occurred consistently over roughly 20 years, beginning when my mother and aunt were children living in that apartment. Knives, scissors, and any sharp object would go missing constantly, almost daily. And every single time, without fail, those items would be found in the exact same place, piled together on top of a shelf in my grandfather's office. I remember very clearly waking up in the middle of the night and seeing the shadows of people moving around, reflected on the walls, even though everyone in the apartment was sound asleep. My mom told me she often heard footsteps and whispers too. No one ever slept well in that apartment. Every single night, all of us had terrible nightmares. Story 8. So, a little context before I start. There are 4 of us in the house, me and my 3 siblings. 3 of us share one room, and our oldest sibling has his own room. It is a fairly sized 2-bedroom, 2-bathroom apartment that we moved into about half a year ago. We have not had any past problems with rodents, nor did the previous tenants. The worst we have dealt with are earthworms, coming in through small gaps that lead outside because it has been raining a lot, and cockroaches. Yesterday, well, technically earlier today, it was around 11 in the morning, almost noon. Everything was normal. My sister and I were in our room, and my brother, the second eldest, had just finished his 3 to 11 work from home shift, since he works with different time zones. When he came into our shared room, he commented on how late it already was, and my sister took note of that. She told me we should go to sleep, since I usually sleep at the same time as she does out of habit. We get ready together. But I had not brushed my teeth yet. I told her that, then headed downstairs. Right away, I started feeling this eerie, unsettling sensation. And keep in mind, this was not the first time I had gone downstairs alone because I forgot to brush my teeth. I am fully aware that it is normal to feel a little nervous being alone downstairs at night. But this time, it felt different, stranger, and heavier than usual. So, the layout is basically like this. The bathroom is to the left at the bottom of the staircase, and the kitchen is nearby. There is also this small, empty room that you can see through the window in front of the kitchen and the small upper window in the bathroom. At night, it is absolutely terrifying because there is no light in that room at all, and it feels like you are staring straight into pitch black darkness. So I'm brushing my teeth in the kitchen like usual. Yeah, we don't do it in the bathroom because the sink is tiny and the water pressure is pathetic. And I get that feeling again, like something is staring at me through the window over the sink. It's happened before, so I told myself it was just paranoia and kept doing my thing. After that, I headed to the bathroom, the way I always do, so I don't end up needing to pee in the middle of the night while everyone's asleep. But the second I walked in, it felt off. Not scary, just wrong. Usually, it feels like something is watching me through the little upper window. But tonight, it was weirdly calm. Too calm. Like daytime calm. Like the calm before a storm. I finished my nightly routine at around 1 in the morning, turned off the kitchen light, and started walking up the stairs. And there it was again, that creepy feeling that I was being followed, even though the hallway stair lights were on. We had a setup where a switch downstairs and another upstairs controlled the same light, so you didn't have to turn it off and run up the steep stairs in complete darkness. I usually switched it off before going into my room, but this time I didn't because the switch was in the foyer, not next to our room, and I didn't feel like being surrounded by total darkness. My room light was off since my sister was already asleep, and I didn't want to disturb her. So I plopped onto my bed and scrolled through TikTok until I felt sleepy. As I was drifting off, everything was peaceful until I heard a clicking sound, the kind you hear when someone tries to open a locked door. At first, I figured it was just my glasses shifting on my very messy desk, since they make the same noise, and I forced myself not to overthink it. But then something started scratching at the door. I was really freaked out at first, but I tried to stay logical and told myself it might just be a rat, even though this house had never had rat problems. Still, the paranoid part of me needed to make sure the door was locked, just in case, so I stumbled over and checked the knob. Yes, it was closed, thankfully. But the scratching was odd. There was no way it was a rodent, and if it was, it would have been pretty damn big, because something was scratching all around my doorknob and the middle of the door. I knew exactly where it was, because I felt for the vibrations on the wood. It wasn't light, it was slightly harsh, like something wanted to come in, but not angrily. Almost like a dog, but we don't have a dog, or any pets. My eldest brother's girlfriend does have a dog, and she sometimes stays overnight with it in my brother's separate room. But I had only seen one pair of slippers outside his room before going into mine. And even if it was the dog, she's very short and very emotional. She would have been whining or barking, and there's no way she could reach that high. And to make it worse, there was a thin sliver of light shining under our bedroom door from the staircase hallway light. And it disappeared for a moment, like something had moved in front of it, trying to peek through. At that point, I was pretty freaked out. I was not about to get slimed by some random demon at 1 a.m. So I did what any sane person would do. I woke up my sister. As soon as I started urgently whispering for her to wake up, my brother woke up too, and he immediately realized I wasn't imagining things when he also looked concerned at the abnormally loud scratching at our door. They both started silently freaking out, mostly because of how terrified I was. I don't get scared by normal weird night noises, and they know I wouldn't lie or hallucinate something like that. Then my brother started acting like a horror movie side character who dies in the first 10 minutes. He grabbed his flashlight and actually started walking toward the door to open it. I was losing my mind. Not only would he get slimed if something abnormal was behind that door, but all of us would. I braced myself for the end of my life when he finally opened it. But nothing. No rat, no dog, no person, no demon, nothing at all. The scratching just stopped the moment he opened the door, like it had never happened. Honestly, I was both relieved and terrified. Relieved that we didn't get slimed, but terrified because what if his dumb self just let the thing in? He even checked around the hallway and downstairs, but he found absolutely nothing. And then, as soon as he closed our door again, a few minutes later, the scratching started up again. They kept telling me it was nothing and that I should just go to sleep, especially since it was already 2 a.m. by the time he finished checking the house. Meanwhile, I was practically crapping myself. This was exactly the kind of horror movie plot where the characters find nothing during the abnormal activity, only to get their cheeks absolutely clapped by a jump scare 5 minutes later. I refused to sleep, so they finally agreed to push the dresser against the door as a safety measure. Eventually, exhaustion took over, and I miraculously didn't get slimed in my sleep. But I did wake up around 3:40 or 4 a.m. in a cold sweat with a horrible feeling. Maybe it was just because it was literally the witching hour and everything feels creepy at that time. But I swear on my dad's life that something was in my room. For the rest of the night, I kept my nightlight on. Yes, I'm a scaredy cat. I have a nightlight at my big age. Deal with it. Until the sun finally came up. And if there was something in my room, at least it wasn't physically there anymore by morning. Honestly, I don't care whether the explanation is paranormal or logical. Just please give me something to work with, because I cannot figure out for the life of me what the hell that was. Side note, in case anyone is wondering, no, it was not my eldest brother. He is not the type to play pranks, and that dude is ancient, so the best bet is that he would be asleep by 10:30. Story 9. Something I have not told anyone about this. There is this hospital that is supposedly haunted, but it is no longer a hospital. It is now a home for seniors. Shocking, I know. LOL. The place is called Linda Vista in Boyle Heights. It was the year 2012 on a Friday night. My friends and I had just finished DJing a house party, and we decided to hang out at a park. Across the street from the park was the old hospital. There was a security guard watching the place, but on the down low, he would charge $10 to let people go inside and look around. I was the only one who went in, probably because I had the bigger balls. LOL. Anyway, I walked inside and suddenly it felt cold, and there was this strange smell I cannot even describe, but it was awful. I started walking around. It was pitch black, so I had to use the flashlight on my phone. It was so quiet that if you dropped a pin, you could hear it. Nothing really happened while I was inside. No sounds, nothing moving. It just felt incredibly creepy and gave me a bad feeling. Until I got home. That is when everything started to hit the fan. The next night, around 9 in the evening, I was in my room on Facebook chatting with some friends. My mom and dad were at work, and my little brother was already asleep. I heard dishes in the kitchen, like someone was putting them away. I assumed it was my little brother, but he was still asleep. I went to check, and as soon as I got closer, the noise stopped. I froze. I could not move because I was terrified. I thought I was tripping, but I knew I wasn't. I went back to my room, and as soon as I walked in, it got really cold. I did not think much of it until it was about 2 in the morning. I was still awake, talking to friends on Facebook. Next to my room, at the far end of the house, there was another room, a small room with just a bed in it. That door always stayed locked because no one used it unless visitors came. At 2 in the morning, I heard knocking coming from that room. When I got closer, it knocked again. I knew better than to open that door because I could have let something in. The knocks stopped, and I am not kidding. When I sat back down in my chair, someone from that room yelled, "Open the door," in a woman's voice. The voice was raspy and sounded evil. It was loud enough that it should have woken everyone up, but everyone was still asleep except me. I ran to the living room and slept there. I prayed and told whatever was in that room to go away, and I apologized if I had disturbed it when I went inside that hospital. After that night, I never heard or felt anything in that house again. And I never went back inside that hospital. To this day, I have not told anyone about this. That room always stayed mysterious. We do not live there anymore, so that is that. Story 10. I think my new apartment is haunted. My 2 roommates and I moved in this past weekend, and we have already noticed strange things happening in one of the bathrooms and in one of the girls' bedrooms. First, one roommate kept hearing weird breathing sounds in her room. She actually came into the hallway to ask me why I was making strange noises and said it sounded like I was possessed. I had no idea what she was talking about. She thought I was doing breathing exercises or something. Second, a guest told us they felt creeped out in our bathroom and thought they heard laughing late at night while they were in there. Later, my roommate was taking a shower and said she also kept hearing laughing. Neither of them knew the other had heard the same thing. Third, my roommate was taking a shower when she heard loud banging, like someone was knocking at the door. She rushed out of the bathroom and went downstairs to open the front door, but no one was there. She went back upstairs to continue her shower, and as soon as she was in the bathroom again, the same banging started. But once she stepped into the hallway, it stopped completely. Fourth, our dog has been acting strangely in that bedroom. He just stands there staring at random spots. He is usually relaxed, but in that room, he seems alert and anxious. I am generally sensitive to energies, and overall, I feel uneasy in these areas, slightly uncomfortable and unsettled. Even before any of this happened, I don't feel that way in my own room or in the other parts of the apartment. Is there anything we can do in this situation? We don't want to get rid of the ghost or spirit or whatever it might be. We just don't want to feel so unsettled. And who knows, it could just be that it's an old apartment. But these things are definitely isolated to just 2 rooms. Story 11. About 18 years ago, my wife and I bought a house that was built in the 1950s. You could tell it had been neglected for a while by its previous owner. It was a small southern town, and the neighbors told us that a man had lived in the house alone after his wife and daughter left him. Apparently, both he and the house fell into disrepair. Some neighbors vaguely suggested he had killed himself, while others said he simply moved away. The master bedroom always felt a little sad to me. It did not feel evil, just heavy, like there was a sense of loneliness or desolation lingering there. The rest of the house did not feel that way at all. Overall, it was a good place to live. We had an attached garage with an attic above it. It was a low-ceiling attic, so it was hard to stand upright, and I mostly used it to store the Christmas tree and boxes of things we did not want but could not really throw away. A ladder came down from a door in the garage ceiling, but usually I would just climb the ladder, grab or put away something within arm's reach of the attic door, and be done. I never really liked the feel of the attic. Often, when we watched TV in the evening in our living room, we would hear a large thud from the attic, which was directly over our heads. It happened once per evening, always the same heavy thud and always in the same spot above us. It occurred on most nights, but never more than once. I went up there a few times, thinking, hoping, that an animal had found a way into the attic. But there were no signs that any animal large enough to make that kind of noise could get in or out. There were no holes in the roof or walls, no droppings, and no evidence that a creature had been using the space for shelter. It was strange, and most nights we heard that single thud coming from the attic directly above us. One time, I needed to put some extra boxes in the attic. Not wanting to go far into the space, I climbed the ladder and pushed the new boxes against the old ones to move everything farther back. When I shoved the boxes deeper into the attic, I felt some resistance, pushed through it, and then something made a very loud rattling sound, like a rattlesnake, but amplified. The sound came from the same area where the nightly thud always seemed to originate, the spot above our living room. I basically jumped out of the attic, barely even using the ladder. We moved out of state not long after that. I had to get back into the attic during the move, and although I did not like it at all, nothing unusual happened. That is all I know about it. Story 12. During either my junior or senior year of high school, my dad moved into a new house after divorcing my ex-stepmom. I had 2 younger siblings between them, a younger brother and a younger sister. Since I lived with my mom most of the time during high school and stayed on campus during my first college semester, I shared a room in this house with Anna, my younger sister, who is about 9 years younger than me. Alex, my younger brother, is 6 years younger than me and had his own room down the hall. This incident takes place in the upstairs hallway. For context, the hallway leads off from the kitchen. Going down it, you pass the kids' bathroom on the left, with Alex's bedroom door directly across on the right. Continuing down, the hallway ends in a small square with the entrances to Anna's room, my room, and Dad's room arranged catty-corner to each other. I hope that is not too confusing. One night, during the summer before I started college, I was coming home late from a date with my then boyfriend. It was about 2 a.m, so everyone in the house was asleep. When I came inside, I could already hear my dad snoring, so I knew he was out cold. I went upstairs and walked to my room. Alex's door and Dad's door were both shut, which meant they were asleep. Anna was asleep in our room. I tossed my phone onto my bed and went to the bathroom to get ready. I shut the bathroom door and started getting dressed for bed and brushing my teeth. As I was finishing up and brushing my hair, I heard a noise on the other side of the bathroom door, out in the hallway. That did not surprise me at first, since Alex often got up in the middle of the night to use the bathroom. I reached for the handle to tell him I would only be a second, but before I could turn it, I froze. The first sound had been the creaking of the wood flooring in the hallway, but now I heard a different sound, breathing. Now, that does not seem frightening on its own, but it was not normal breathing. It was heavy, not labored, just heavy. It is hard to explain, but there is a clear difference between the sound of a child breathing and the sound of an adult breathing when everything is completely silent. And this breathing sounded like an adult. I could still hear my dad snoring, so I knew it was not him. And it could not have been Alex. That was why I stopped in the first place. Also, when the footsteps moved toward the kitchen, they sounded heavy, like a grown man walking. That was when I started to panic. My first thought was that there was an intruder. There was a sliding back door in the kitchen that led to the backyard, and our fence was not difficult to climb. I worried that one of the kids might have left it unlocked when they went to the park behind the house, and no one noticed. I knew for certain that I had locked the front door when I came in, but since I had not used the back door, I had not checked it. Since it all made sense in my mind, I panicked even more. I locked the door and held my breath, hearing the breathing start down the hallway. The creaking of the floorboards signaled how close it was to the bathroom door. I froze in absolute fear. The breathing was heavy and clear, like a man was standing directly on the other side. I was shaking. My dad always locked his door at night, so he couldn't help my siblings. My phone was in my room on the bed, and I had no weapon in the bathroom. I hadn't heard any more movement outside the door, but the breathing was still there. I slowly and quietly knelt down to look under the door, searching for feet. I was so scared I could hear my heart beating in my ears. There was nothing. No feet. And suddenly, no breathing. The creaking was gone as well. I stood up, still trying to be silent, and grabbed my hairbrush. It was the best thing I had for a weapon, and I planned to make a mad dash for my phone on my bed. I held the hairbrush and quietly unlocked the door, then held my breath and listened. Nothing. I yanked the door open and looked up and down the hallway. Nothing. I ran to my room, grabbed my phone, and called the boyfriend I had been on a date with hours earlier. I even asked if he had come inside after dropping me off. I was so convinced someone had been in the house. With him on the phone, I went through and checked the whole place. There was nothing. I checked the back door in the kitchen, and it was locked. Alex and Anna were sleeping peacefully, and from my dad's snoring, I could tell he hadn't woken up either. I went to bed that night with my door locked. The next morning, I told my dad everything that had happened. He could tell I had genuinely been scared, so he checked everywhere as well. Apparently, we had an alarm system too, and it hadn't gone off that night. It wasn't an intruder, or at least not a person. But it felt so real and so terrifying that I didn't visit my dad for a while afterward, and it was a few months before I spent the night in that house again. Story 13. I have a Labrador with white-yellow fur, so I can usually see her even in very low light. Last night at around 3, I woke up for a drink, which is very rare for me. My dog normally follows me everywhere, so I didn't think much about whether she did in the middle of the night. The room was occupied by me, my sister sleeping on the other side, and Kiki, my dog. When I came back from the kitchen, I saw what I thought was Kiki under my sister's bed, where she often liked to sleep. I called her name and could see what looked like her eyes staring at me. Dark eyes, a dark nose against light fur, visible even in the dim room. I called for her a few more times, and although she didn't come out, I could see movement, like she was turning her head toward me, each time I spoke, and then turning it away again. After about 15 minutes, I noticed movement on the other side of the room's door through the small gap underneath. It looked like Kiki was trying to get my attention from the hallway without barking. She usually knows not to bark at night unless it is an emergency, so she was just pawing and nudging at the gap. I got confused and immediately opened the door, only to see that Kiki had been in the hallway the entire time. I went back to look under the bed, and there was nothing. Absolutely nothing. The window was shut since the air conditioner was on. I just hope there's nothing to worry about, especially since this is my first experience in the new apartment. Thanks for your time. Update: I am in the room right now, and Kiki is on my bed cuddling with me. Naturally, I kept glancing toward the spot where I saw it yesterday, hoping I would not see anything. I guess my prayers were answered, because instead of seeing something, I heard something. A soft whisper like, "Ha," right next to my ear. I usually have my AirPods in at this time of night and listen to random things, but I have not been using them for the past 2 days. Now I am wondering how many signs I might have missed in the month I have lived in this apartment. Story 14. I like stories about the paranormal, but I have never personally experienced anything myself and tend to be pretty skeptical. Still, there was one strange situation I wanted to run by you all to see what you think. Back in 2009, I was in college a couple of hours away from home. My grandparents, who I had lived with during the last 2 years of high school, were away at their second property for the weekend, working on the retirement home they were building. I wanted to get off campus, so my friends, let's call them J and N, and I decided to stay at my grandparents' house for the weekend. My friend J claims to be sensitive. She has told me stories about things coming into her room when she was growing up, and I can tell she believes what she says. But as far as I know, science has not demonstrated any kind of life after death, so I remained skeptical. I could tell something was off as soon as we pulled up to the house. I grabbed my bag from the truck and looked over at Jay, only to see her staring up at the house. I asked if she was okay, and she answered with just one word, "Occupado," before picking up her bag and heading inside with us. Let me give you the layout. The house was built in the 80s, and my grandparents bought it in 1999. The previous owner had died in the home, apparently in his sleep. It was a 2-story brick house backed up to a lake. It was a beautiful place to live, but certain parts of it always creeped me out for reasons I could never name. The front sitting room, the dining room upstairs, and the stairs leading down to the basement, which is where I lived during high school. Still, like I said earlier, I had never experienced anything myself. Anyway, my grandparents knew we were coming for the weekend, but they were going to be gone for a while, so they shut off all the water in the house except for the downstairs bathroom. We went inside, and a few hours later, Jay headed downstairs to use the bathroom. Ann and I stayed upstairs watching a movie. She was gone for quite some time, and when she finally came back up, she asked what we had wanted while she was in the bathroom. Ann and I looked at each other, confused. We hadn't left the room, and we hadn't called for her. We had no idea what she was talking about. She asked if either one of us had come downstairs and tried to turn the bathroom door handle while she was in there. We stared at her, incredulous, and told her we had not. She went pale, and my heart started racing. I thought someone might actually be in the house. N and I grabbed knives from the kitchen and searched every room, looking for an intruder. We found nothing. The house stayed quiet for the rest of the weekend. I still think about that sometimes. I don't know what it was. Maybe my friend was daydreaming. Maybe she got in her own head. Maybe she was messing with us, though she still swears she wasn't. Maybe there really was someone in the house, though we would have heard a door open. The security system beeped if any door or window was moved. I just don't know. What do you think? Story 15. Something just scared the crap out of me. I thought I would share this because it literally happened about 20 minutes ago, and I'm still running on adrenaline and completely freaked out. I had just finished meditating my way out of a panic attack and finally accepted that I could no longer ignore the fact that I needed to use the bathroom. The bathroom is downstairs, and I have to brave the dark, creepy stairs to get there, so it is not exactly a trip I look forward to at night. Yes, I am scared of the dark. Understandable when you live in a creepy old house, right? Anyway, I used my phone flashlight to go downstairs and was still trying to keep my breathing under control so I would not spiral back into anxiety. I thought I saw a figure in my peripheral vision standing in the living room doorway, but I chalked it up to a trick of the light. I flipped on the kitchen light, which brightens the whole area, and headed to the bathroom. While I was in there, I heard something fall in the hallway I had just walked through. I thought it was a little strange, but I was more worried about someone blaming me for making noise. There hadn't been any activity in a while, so that possibility wasn't at the front of my mind yet. I finished in the bathroom and walked out. The kitchen light was still on, so I could clearly see what had fallen. It was just a plastic carrier bag that had been sitting on the shoe rack across from the living room. The living room lights were off, and I was not about to stop and pick it up in the dark. I switched off the kitchen light and started walking back up the stairs. I had made it up 4 or 5 steps when I suddenly heard noises behind me. I could not even tell what they were. Rustling, footsteps, tapping. I did not have time to process it. I just felt a cold sensation brush the back of my leg, as if something was right behind me, followed by a wave of dread. I bolted up the stairs. I was not sticking around to find out what the hell that was. As I ran, I heard more noises, almost like whatever it was moved back toward the hallway. So much for lowering my anxiety levels. Now I keep hearing noises downstairs, pots and pans clinking, random thuds. I would check to see if it was an animal, but I live in England, and it is a very small house, so that is out of the question. I guess I will sage the house again. Story 16. My mother's family tells this story at every gathering. With 6 siblings, I've heard it from nearly all of them, and every retelling is the same, steady, consistent, and still chilling. When my mom was young, they lived on an isolated farm with my grandmother. The nearest neighbor was a mile away. The house itself sat about 150 meters back from the highway, connected only by a long, dark, patchy driveway. My grandmother would leave at dawn to work the fields and sell produce, usually returning around 6 in the evening on the bus. My Aunt Anna, the eldest, was 12, far too young to be responsible for 5 younger siblings. But those were harsh years, and my grandmother did what she had to do to keep everyone fed. They had a routine. When Grandma came home, she'd call out from the highway for help carrying the groceries. The children would tear down the driveway because she always brought snacks, small treats they waited for all day. One evening, right around 6, they heard her voice ring out from the familiar distance. "Come out and help me with my stuff." 4 of them rushed outside, my mother among them. They thought it was strange they hadn't heard the bus stop, but brushed it off. The driveway had no lights, so they sprinted through the dim toward the highway, expecting to see her silhouette. But when they reached the end of the drive, the road was empty. It stretched in both directions, silent and bare. They called out again and again, voices echoing into nothing. Then my aunt felt a sharp, sudden chill, one she still talks about with a shiver. Without hesitation, she ordered everyone back inside. That's when the realization hit them. They had all heard it, my grandmother's exact voice, calling the same words she said every evening, at the exact time she always returned. The fear came all at once. A few of the younger ones began to cry. The older siblings prayed as they rushed to lock every door and window. Not one of them slept that night. The next morning, my grandmother came home early. She explained she'd missed the last bus and had been forced to stay in town overnight. So who or what had called them out into the darkness? Story 17. I've never actually posted on Reddit before, probably because I'm new, but this happened to me last year. It's a very peculiar story, so bear with me. Right at the end of my 10th grade, sophomore year, and the start of summer vacation, I decided to take a solo trip to my dad's hometown. I was going to stay at my aunt's house first, then visit my grandparents for a week before my mom came to pick me up to go to her hometown. With all the freedom I had at my grandparents' house, I did what a lot of people my age do: watch Netflix like an insomniac. I had been at my grandparents' house for about 3 days, and everything had been normal. But on the night of the 21st of April, I was awake, probably watching either an early 2000s rom-com or a sitcom, and it was around 2:30 in the morning when I started to feel sleepy. I switched off my phone and drifted off. About 15 minutes later, I woke up because I needed to use the washroom. When I came back to bed, I heard piano sounds, clear, unmistakable notes. It felt as if the sound was coming from inside the house or just outside it. I was terrified. The first thing I did was look outside my bedroom door, but nothing was there. I pulled out my phone and started recording because I knew people would think I had only been dreaming. I texted my mom, who was in a completely different state miles away, at around 3 in the morning, absolutely freaking out. I told her I wasn't going to be that naive horror movie girl who goes after the ghost, but I did it anyway. I looked out my window and found absolutely nothing. Still, it felt as if the sound had been right next to me. I recorded it once more. Then, like a coward who never thought she'd end up in a situation like this, I hid under my blanket and counted sheep. But the strangest part didn't happen that night. It happened in the days that followed. I sent the recording to my parents and played it for my grandparents. Both of my grandparents said they heard nothing but the fan, and my dad said the same. But my mom, on the other hand, could clearly hear the piano notes. Even I could hear the piano in the recording the next morning. But when my sister listened to it, she couldn't hear anything at all. A week later, I was at my maternal grandparents' home. I brought the whole thing up again because my uncle, my mom's brother, has always been into paranormal stuff. I showed him the recording without mentioning the piano, and he immediately heard it. My maternal grandfather heard it too. But when my aunt and maternal grandmother listened, they couldn't hear anything at all, just like my dad and my sister. Now, you might tell me that maybe some internally crushed musician was playing at 3 in the morning. But here's the thing. My dad's hometown is a very rural area, which is why I chose to spend my summer there. It's quiet, far from the busy city life. Most people live below the poverty line, so where could a piano possibly come from? It could be the music that sometimes comes from cars when they're unlocked without a key. But again, no one has a car there. There's only a car on the street when my dad brings his, or if one of my cousins visits. But that night, it was just me. And even if there had been a car, I would have known. So many questions and no answers. But why did it sound like it was right in my room or just outside the window? It didn't sound like a bird or the wind or any kind of whistling. As someone who actually practices musical instruments, I know what a piano sounds like, and that was definitely a piano. But why could only a few people hear it while others couldn't? Honestly, I thought I was losing my mind until I found out that my mom, my uncle, and my grandfather could hear it too. Story 18. I suddenly woke up at around 1:30 in the morning, completely alert. I got up, used the bathroom, and went back to bed. I was lying there, trying to fall asleep again, when I heard my daughter scream. It wasn't a long scream, more like a short, cut-off one. Hard to describe. I had a heated eye mask on, so I pulled it off quickly and got up. She gets nightmares often, so at first it didn't feel unusual. But both of our dogs were on high alert, heading toward the living room, which is where the sound had come from. I went straight to my daughter's room, and she was asleep in the exact same position she'd been in when I covered her up just 5 or 10 minutes earlier. Her room is right next to mine. If you walk down the hallway, our doors sit on the same wall at the end. I scooped her up and brought her to bed with me. Now I have both kids in my bed, both dogs next to me, and I've been lying here unable to fall, back asleep for over an hour. It's close to 2 in the morning. I also have 2 cats. They absolutely refuse to come inside. Normally, they spend the day outside and come in to sleep at night. But ever since we moved into this house 2 months ago, they just refuse. My niece came by last weekend with her friend. Her friend is very in-tuned and also native, from multiple tribes. Too many for me to remember or list. She said something was here and warned, "Don't let her in." She mentioned a great aunt. I'm not sure if I have one. I mean, I do, but I don't know any names or details. I never knew them, and as far as I know, I have no connection to them. My situation is a bit strange since we just moved into this house. I can't say for certain what's normal for the kids' sleeping habits, but previously they slept in their own beds without issue. Lately, though, they demand to sleep with me and get hysterical when I say no. They are 5 and 3. Normally, this kind of behavior doesn't exist with them, so it feels very unusual. Story 19. My boyfriend and I moved into a new house that we're renovating about 3 weeks ago. When we first moved in, the previous owners had left all of their furniture, including the bedding and sheets, but they had taken all of their knickknacks and personal items. It felt almost like we were stepping into someone else's home rather than our own. The house was built in the 1950s, and the former owners bought it in the 80s and raised their family here. The wife developed dementia and passed away, and the husband is now in a care home. During the first week, everything felt calm. Neither of us felt uncomfortable or spooked by anything at all. Late last week, my boyfriend went up into the attic and discovered some boxes of old toys from the 1960s. Toys that were actually worth a decent amount of money. He brought them down, and we went through them, looking up their values. We were pretty excited about the find. They could easily cover the cost of our new bathroom. By the time we had packed everything up and put the boxes in a cupboard in our bedroom, it was probably around 10 o'clock at night. I would have just been falling asleep at 10 o'clock on Monday when my boyfriend, who was in the spare bedroom sorting things out, heard the kitchen extraction fan turn on. He went downstairs and shone his torch on the fan. I'm not sure why he didn't just turn the light on. The moment he did, the fan switched off. He took a step closer and the fan turned back on. The extractor is an old one with a switch that goes from 0 to 3. When he looked at it, the switch was on too. He unplugged the fan and went back upstairs, and a while later he heard loud banging on the stairs. We had ripped up the old carpet just the day before, so the stairs are especially loud and creaky right now. It's a very distinct sound. After that, he went to bed. As he was lying there, he heard plates and cutlery clattering in the kitchen. Then came rhythmic tapping noises that he said sounded like a walking stick moving from room to room downstairs. It was just getting light at around 4:30 the next morning when I woke up, and he said that the moment I woke up, the noises stopped. My dad is a vicar, so that morning I called him, explained everything, and asked him to come bless the house. He arrived at around 8 in the evening. We walked through the house, placed candles, and prayed. My dad asked any spirit to leave the home. Typical blessing things. I went to bed that night at around 9:30. At 10 o'clock, I heard the tapping. It sounded exactly like my boyfriend had described, like a walking stick. We lit some frankincense and went around the house praying for protection, lighting more candles, and telling the spirit to leave. We even opened the front door for it. We thought we had done it. We went to bed feeling pretty smug, and everything stayed quiet that night. The next night, we again went to bed feeling safe and a little smug. But at around midnight, my boyfriend woke up to a noise he described as sounding like someone throwing an object onto a cluttered table. It was loud and lasted for about 5 seconds. That's when the tapping started again, this time for 10 minutes. And then it happened again at 1 in the morning, lasting another 5 minutes. It's worth noting that my boyfriend is a plumber and gas engineer. The tapping noise is definitely not the pipes. The heating is off, none of the taps are running, and the sound doesn't match anything mechanical. We hear absolutely nothing during the day. The house feels peaceful. It's only after 10 at night, when it's completely dark, that something feels wrong. The one thing that gives me a bit of peace of mind is that our cat isn't freaking out. But he is also very stupid and loves literally everyone, so I'm not sure he would freak out, even if he should. We're wondering if this could be connected to the toys in the attic, since it only started after my boyfriend brought them down. My question is, what can we do? We've had a vicar bless the house. We've told the spirit to leave. We've burned frankincense. We've prayed. We're kind of at a loss at the moment. Could it be because some of the previous owners' things are still here, like their armchair, table, and chairs, and a bed in the spare room? We're waiting for a dump permit and we'll be getting rid of all of it. If anyone has any suggestions, we would be so grateful. This is our first home together, and we were so excited to start this journey. But this has put a massive damper on it. Story 20. I keep hearing footsteps climbing my staircase. I figured I'd share what's been happening in case anyone has ideas about what this could be. It's a little long, but I want to include as many details as possible so I don't leave out anything that might help explain it. I'm renting a townhouse that's only about 20 years old at this point. My sister owns the place. She bought it from our mom when she moved to another city, and I'm renting with her while I save up for an apartment. The staircase in question is the only one in the apartment, and my bedroom is at the top and around the corner. I share a wall with the staircase void, but my door is to the right of the stairs. It's not a squeaky staircase, but because there's a Harry Potter-style space underneath it, the steps make a distinctly hollow sound when someone walks on them. They're carpeted, so the footsteps sound heavy, but muffled. About 3 months ago, I was home alone one night on a video call with my partner, who's living overseas at the moment. I was lying in bed with the light on, and everything felt normal. I thought I heard a noise at first, but I brushed it off, assuming it was the cat knocking books off the shelf in the living room next to the staircase. Then, as clearly as I've heard anything in my life, I heard distinct footsteps coming up the stairs. 4 or 5 steps out of about 10. My sister was on her night shift at the hospital and had left about an hour earlier, so I knew it wasn't her. I was completely convinced that someone had broken into the house, so I dropped my phone, scrambled out of bed, and grabbed the first weapon-like object I saw. A microphone stand. I know, ridiculous. I got to the stairs, and no one was there. I searched the entire house to make sure no one was hiding or to check for any signs of a break-in. Nothing. I assumed break-in first because the corner shop near our complex has been broken into many, many times before. I thought maybe it was the cat, but the sound was too heavy and had the distinct rhythm of human footsteps coming up the stairs. So I convinced myself that maybe I was hearing my neighbor walking up her staircase. We share a wall, but it's a triple brick wall, and her staircase isn't even on the wall we share, and I've never heard anything like that before. But it had to be that. I moved on with my life and didn't hear anything again until last night. Similar circumstances. It was between 1:30 and 2 in the morning. I was lying in bed, watching YouTube on my laptop with the lights on, when I heard it again. This time, the cat was sitting on the edge of my bed, completely unbothered by the sound. And my neighbor was not home. I know because I water her front garden when she visits her kids at the coast. and it was the first week since COVID that they'd allowed interstate travel. I checked the stairs, and surprise, surprise, nothing. The sound isn't rushed. It honestly sounds like someone wearing heavy shoes, maybe boots, walking calmly up the stairs. My neighbor rarely has guests. Her son visits sometimes, but he parks his van in their driveway when he's here, and he never comes over when she's not home. I took a quick look at her front wall this morning to see if there were any signs of a break-in, but there was nothing. I'll ask her tonight if she's missing anything valuable from her house. Thank you for watching. If you enjoyed this video, be sure to give it a thumbs up, subscribe, and hit the bell icon so you never miss an update.